over, I will make sure in the chat I have shared a link, and you can view the presentation at your end, or we can just view it on my screen, however you want to do it, right? Great. So this is a very basic GA4 training session. I was told that the audience that is going to attend this, they are going to be a mixture of technical and non-technical persons. That means we have some people who are mostly dealing with GA4 for a non-technical perspective, such as for digital marketing purposes and looking at the audience in different sections. And then there is one group of people which is responsible for configuring Google Analytics 4 using maybe Google Tag Manager or GTAG configurations. All right, so this session is mainly focused on GA4, how it works, and a way you can find different kind of reports. If we get time at the end of the session, then we will look at GTM and how we can configure Google Tag Manager. So my name is Hassan. I will be conducting this session, and we will try to cover most of the things in GA4. If we get time, then we will get to Google Tag Manager. Otherwise, we will see if we need another session, and then we will do that. All right. So in this basic one, we are just going to go over how GA4 is mainly different from Universal Analytics, how we are going to build custom reports, how we can find the similar reports that we had in Universal Analytics in GA4, and Google Tag Manager will go at the end. If you want to follow along, you can click on this link and it will take you to the demo store, where you can find two links. If you will scroll down, one is for Google Analytics for merchandise store. This is what Google has implemented on their website, where they are tracking traffic and all the other e-commerce events. We are using this store as a reference because this one has a lot of information and a lot of data already filled in, and we can use it as a demo account. And in comparison to this, we have a Universal Analytics one, which is also implemented on the same website. So both of them are kind of getting this data from the same source. However, they just have a different integration models. One is using GA4, and then the other one is using Universal Analytics. All right. So far, anyone has any questions? One more thing, this is supposed to be a 2-hour session, and what I was hoping for us to do is that we could do a 45-minute session and then take a 15-minute question answer break, then continue again after 45 minutes, for 45 minutes, and then end it after another ask question session. All right. We are not going to spend a lot of time inside this sheets. Most of the time will be on the Google Analytics 4 itself. So the first thing to start off is that why we need a Google Analytics 4 property if we already have a Universal Analytics working fine. The answer to that one is simple. This one was getting a lot old. We had Universal Analytics for about 12 years now, and now it was actually time to upgrade it to GA4. GA4 is also better because it has a better user interface, but the main difference between Universal Analytics and GA4 is that previously, Universal Analytics can only track any traffic that is coming from your website. That means if the client has a mobile application working alongside with a website, this Universal Analytics will not capture any of that information that is being tracked for the mobile application. So in order to track any users that are visiting the mobile application, you need to set up a separate Firebase system. But using Google Analytics 4, you can do the same thing with the same account. You can track your website visitors and you can track your website visitors, as well as you can track your iOS devices or your Android devices using the same data stream. Data stream is how you bring information inside your Google Analytics 4 account. It is very similar to how we have a tracking ID inside Universal Analytics. So the stream measurement ID, this is what accounts for a GA4 stream. you can have more than one stream, one for website, one for Android, and one for iOS, and that should work fine. It is not recommended to have more than one web analytics stream. So for example, if you have two different domains, one is google.com and then the other one is analytics.google.com. So you have one primary domain and one secondary domain, and you want to track both of those inside one GA4. So you don't need two different web streams. You can actually use one stream to track both of the website and send the data back to one GA4 account. So one stream is fine as long as both the businesses are the same. This one also uses machine learning algorithm. It works very similar to how Google Ads work. Universal Analytics is a lot more cookie-based system. That means when the user lands on the website, they drop a cookie on the particular website for that user, which looks something like this. Universal Analytics used to drop the cookie, and GA4 also does that. But GA4's cookie is a little different than Universal Analytics. And it does not really rely on the cookie. The cookie is just there to make sure that a better tracking system can be implemented. However, the cookie is not necessary for GA4. The cookie is also used when we try to do cross-domain tracking, which we will look at a little ahead in this session. All right, the integration part that we have in GA4, you might remember that in Universal Analytics, when you create a goal under your admin section, goals are something that are important for a particular business that can be marked as conversions. So anything that is important for your particular business, it can be purchase, transaction, anything on your website. We mark that as a conversion, and then we import that conversion inside Google Ads. That is the one thing. Importing goals. And then the second option we used to have is called custom audiences. So we can create custom audiences based on some actions that the user has done on a website, such as maybe users who made a purchase on the website, maybe users who filled out a particular form on the website, and to track and retarget those users on Google Ads, we can create audiences and import those audiences inside Google Ads account. So each time we create a new audience, we have to manually import that in Google Ads. But in GA4, the system is a little different. Once you link your Google Ads account and agree to all the Google signals, you don't have to do manual integration with Google Ads and Google Analytics. They are kind of seamlessly integrated so far. All right, so the main benefit of having GA4 is that you can use one stream to track your applications, iOS apps, and your website. You don't need more than one Google Analytics account to track all the three different types of businesses. And it's using machine learning algorithm to enhance the data that has been captured. And based on that information, it provides useful insights in GA4. And then the third thing is that it is seamlessly being integrated with Google Ads. There is, however, one particular issue when we create audiences for Google Ads. We will look at that when we will go a little ahead in the session. All right. So far, anyone has any question? If you get any question, you can just drop that in the chat. I will make sure that I will see the chat once in a while to see if there are any questions or not. Okay. So let's start with the main differences that we have in GA4 and Universal Analytics. Okay, the main difference between Universal Analytics and GA4 is that how they use to measure the events. So in Universal Analytics, we have something called a hit. Anything that has been sent to Google Analytics in the Universal Analytics is called a hit. Hit is something whenever anything goes back to Universal Analytics, it is counted as a hit. And hit has 4 different scopes. One is called session scope, then we have user scope, then we have event scope, and then we have product scope. So all the 4 things, they tells Universal Analytics that what kind of a particular hit has been sent to Universal Analytics. It makes it easier for Universal Analytics to see what the particular hit was about. So let's say if a user visited a particular page, so that page is attached with a session. So each session has some different page views. So if a user lands on a website, does not do anything on the website and leaves the website without any engagement, then the bounce rate goes to 100%, and that is counted under the scope session. However, in GA4 we don't have this session different scopes that we used to have here. Everything in GA4 is based off of events. So in Universal Analytics, it was page view. In GA4, it is called an event. Anything that we had in Universal Analytics is now simply an event in GA4. And we don't configure everything inside admin section. We have a separate configure option where we create all the custom definitions for custom domain, custom dimensions, as well as custom matrices. So we have some custom metrics here, a coupon member in these. And the only two types of scopes now we have are event scopes and user scopes. User scopes are everything that are related to a particular user, where our event scope are all things that are related to a particular event. For example, if let's say if a user makes a transaction on your website and you are sending some information back to GA4 with that particular event, such as maybe the revenue, the total revenue of that purchase event, or if you are creating a user ID, if you're creating a unique user ID when the user makes a purchase, you are also sending that information back to GA4. So the unique user ID is the user scope session. So that user ID will be attached to all the events that user has done on the website. However, the transaction ID or the transaction revenue, that will be an event scope thing. So that will only be attached to that particular event. So anything that is sent under an event scope, it will be linked to one particular event. It will not be attached to all the events. However, anything that is sent under the user scope, that will be attached to all the events that the user has done on the website. The main benefit of having user scope is that let's say a user is doing, the user has 4 different sessions on 4 different devices. Once they maybe looked at your product from their mobile phone, and then they went on their laptop, and then they made a purchase of the computer. So if you have a session, a user property for that particular user, Google Analytics 4 will be able to see that the user came in from mobile application first, and that was their first touch point, and then they went to the laptop to make a purchase. So it will be able to link both those sessions for that particular user. So it is a little helpful if we can plan ahead with the user ID thing, but the user ID thing only work if we have some kind of a way to make a user log into the website. If the user is not logged into the website, then we don't get to use the user ID feature that we are talking about here. So all the session that the user will do on the website, they will be linked back to the client ID. Client ID is what we talked about earlier in the session. This is the client ID of each user. So each Google Analytics cookie will be their client ID. All right, so that's the first difference between Universal Analytics and GA4. Everything in Universal Analytics is a hit, and it can have 4 different scopes. Session scope, all the things that are related to one particular sessions are session scope. All the things related to e-commerce are product scope, and things like that. In GA4, we only have 2 kind of scopes, and everything is counted as event. Everything in GA4 is event. There are no other things. It is just event. So, and we have 2 kinds of scope. One is event scope, and then the other one is user scope. User scope is everything that is linked to a particular user. Event scope is everything that is linked to a particular event, right? There is one more difference in, let's just go one by one. So page views and screens. How page views and screens are measured in GA4. In Universal Analytics, when a configuration event fires on the website, that is when a page view event is fired. And similar behavior is for Universal in GA4 too. So when the user lands on the website, we fire a configuration event, and that configuration event is counted as a page view event. However, we do have the option to separate page view event from the configuration event, but we usually don't do that. Whenever the Google Tag Manager container fires on the website, it fires the configuration tag, And that configuration tag fires three different things on the website. One is called session start. Session start is an event that fires whenever a Google Analytics 4 property fires on the website. It is different than Universal Analytics, because in Universal Analytics, session always start when the user start interacting with the website. If the user does not interact with the website, that is counted as 100% bounce rate, and this session is 0 for that user. However, that is not in GA4. If the user lands on the website, the session start event fires for them, and that counts as a session. Therefore, you might see that in Universal Analytics, you have maybe 16,000 users, and in GA4, you will see that there are 22,000 users. So the total number of users in GA4 is going to be a lot higher than Universal Analytics. That is because it just measures things differently than in Universal Analytics. In Universal Analytics, we had bounce rate, and in GA4, we don't have bounce rate anymore. We have what is called engagement rate, user engagement, because bounce rate does not make sense anywhere else, because when the user lands on the website, it is already doing two events. One is session start and then page view. So therefore, the bounce rate does not make any more sense here in GA4 right now. We also have one more parameter that we send when GA4 event fires. So previously, when Universal Analytics fires a page view event, it only had three things. One was the page title, and on which location the page was firing, that is the page path, and then the page path itself. So we had three things: title, location, and page path. However, in GA4, we also have one more thing. When the page event fired, we get to see the page referral, where the page, what was the previous page where the user came in from. So the page referral is important. However, when the page referral is not present, it sends a direct/none back to the GA4. So if the user is coming from a mobile application and they are Apple iOS 14 users, then you won't be able to see the page referral for that particular user unless we have implemented UTM parameters. UTM parameters are something that helps Google Analytics know that where the user is coming from. So we override the default source and medium sessions of that particular user. So if this one has UTM source of demo account, so this is how Google Analytics knows that where the user is coming from or what kind of property it has to load based on the UTM parameters. All right, so that is how page views and screen views are what are measured in mobile applications. So each time a mobile application is loaded on the website, that is counted as a screen view. It is different than page views. Page views are for web applications and screen views are for mobile applications. You will also see that by default, you will be loaded with the page title and screen class. Screen class is like page title for mobile applications. However, if you wanted to see a report for page paths and queries, you can select the second one, and it will show you all the reports based on the URL of the page. Being the host name will not be present in there. If you wanted to add a secondary dimension to this one, you can always hit the plus sign next to this report to add any kind of secondary dimension that you wanted to add in this report. These reports are more powerful than Universal Analytics because you get to add a lot more things that you did not have in GA4 in Universal Analytics previously. So for example, you can see the sources of all the pages if you will add a secondary dimension of that right next to it. All right, so that's how just you measure page views and screen. In GA4, we had a lot more reports like exit pages, landing pages, content drill down. But in GA4, we don't get all those reports. So for example, if you wanted to see a report very similar to landing pages where all the users landed on the website, so you might remember that we talked about a session start event. So the session start event is whenever the user lands on the website. So you can just go to event count and mark and look for an event called session start. And now it is showing you all the reports of all the pages where the session start event fires. So these are all the landing pages of the website. So however, in Universal Analytics, we roughly had 39 different built-in reports. In GA4, we only get 8 of them. So if you need any kind of report that we used to had in Universal Analytics, we have to build that report ourselves under Explore tab. Under Explore tab, we have some different options. Some are built-in reports that we have, or otherwise we can build some of the reports ourselves. But most of the reports that we had in Universal Analytics, they are no longer present in GA4. We need to build the reports ourselves, whatever reports we need. We will spend some time under the report section to see how different reports can be made. Sessions. Sessions are pretty much the same. However, in GA4, a session always start when the session event fires. We talked about that. That is the first event that is recorded for all the users that land on the website. And that is one of the reasons that the session count is different for all the users in Universal Analytics and GA4. So just keep in mind that if you are comparing the data between your GA4 and your Universal Analytics, and you see that the number of users, the number of active users is different, or you're finding that the number of sessions are not similar in GA4 and Universal Analytics, then that is because GA4 measures sessions differently than Universal Analytics. So that is just going to be a difference throughout. So this is the session start event that always fire when the user lands on the website, and those all the other events are configured separately. In Universal Analytics, you might also remember that there used to be interactive and non-interactive events. So for example, some events are interactive, such as add to cart event or form submission event on the website. That is where the user has actually interacted with the website, or maybe scroll events. But some events are non-interactive. For example, when the user lands on the page and they view a product. So if they land on the page, the view content event, the view product event, that fires automatically. It has nothing to do with the user. So that event is non-interactive event. However, in GA4, we don't have anything such as interactive or non-interactive. Everything is an event, and it does not matter if the user has interacted with that event or not. So that is also one minor distinction between events. One more thing in GA4 sessions, Universal Analytics records all the sessions instantly. So if a user made a session on the website, if they visited the website and the event has fired, it will record that event. But in GA4, let's say the user visited a website and for some reason the event did not reach to GA4. That can be any reason. The event got stuck on their website, or if the event did not fire properly, or if the event fired properly, but we are using server-side tracking and the event did not came to Google Analytics for instantly. So what GA4 does is that it has a 72 hours of window. So if the event comes in after 72 hours, like within 72 hours, it will still count that event as it will still count that as a valid event. So GA4 can take up to 3 days in order to process the actual report. So after 3 days, it will not process any data that was sent 3 days ago. So GA4 has a time window of 3 days to process anything. There is one more difference between GA4 and Universal Analytics in terms of session. You might see that in Universal Analytics, if you will go to real-time view and go to the overview section, you will see that you can always see the active users on your website. However, in GA4, the active user is no longer present. That is because the real-time API in GA4 that we are using, it is very different from how we had the API in Universal Analytics. That means we are never going to see the active number of users in GA4 unless they make any update with the real-time API. However, as of right now, we cannot see the total number of active users on the website. We can see the last 30-minute users. The session count in Universal Analytics ends after 30 minutes of inactivity. However, in GA4, that can be changed. We have an option to configure the session duration of each of users that are visiting our website. You can simply go to your data streams, select a particular data stream for which you want to update the settings, go to more tagging settings. And then you can adjust the session timeout. You can make the timeout for 60 minutes, 100 minutes, but by default it is 30 minutes. So uh, after 30 minutes of inactivity, it will count it as it will count the session has been timed out. All right. Next are custom dimensions and matrices. They are the same as we had in Universal Analytics. However, the only difference is the scope. In Universal Analytics, we had 4 different scopes that we talked about earlier, and in GA4, we only have 2 different scopes. To add new custom dimensions or custom matrices, you don't have to go to admin section anymore. You can go to configure and then custom definitions. Inside custom definitions, you get 2 options. You can either switch to custom dimensions or you can switch to custom matrices. So custom metrics is anything where you can implement any kind of calculations that can be numbers or uh, anything that has to do with the calculation on a particular number. So this discount value, this can be added to another discount value. So this is a custom matrix. However, custom dimension is more like a property of a particular event or a user. So you can name a particular property and have a description for them, and the scope can be user or event based. And then whatever the value that you want the custom dimension to have. Once, let's say you want to have the user ID, or let's say you want to have this member custom dimension for the user. You have to configure this separately inside your Google Tag Manager, or you can request or you can request the person who is responsible for configuring your Google Tag Manager to send this user property when this event is firing. Let me see if we can show you how you can configure event properties and user properties separately in Google Tag Manager. Let me open the test code. All right, so in Google Tag Manager, when you're configuring a new tag for your event, let's say this event can be for anything that you want. So any event parameter that you're sending, you have to add that under the event parameter, and anything that you're sending under user properties, that has to be here. So this member property, this member dimension, this is coming from here. They might have implemented a member, and it can be taking a dynamic value here. And then we have one called coupon. So the coupon is an event parameter. So this one is probably firing when the user is making a purchase on the website. However, we don't need a coupon parameter now. This might be configured previously, because now the coupon parameter has been added officially to the GA4. Same for the page location, page referral, page title, and page URL. These are already added to the built-in definition, so we don't need to configure these anymore. However, if you want to have any custom parameter that you want, you can add that. One more thing to remember when you're setting user scope parameters, you cannot send any actual user information back to Google Analytics 4. You cannot send the real email address, you cannot send first name, you cannot send last name, you cannot send anything that will particularly identify a particular user. However, you can send hashed email, hashed phone numbers, anything that is encrypted and only your CRM at the backend can match up with. So let's say when the user signs up to your website, you are creating a random user ID for that. So you can send that user ID to GA4. However, you cannot send any actual user values when you create custom definitions or custom matrices for a particular user. Right, that's pretty much it for the dimensions. Next, we have content grouping. Content grouping is also same as in Universal Analytics. You might remember that in Universal Analytics, we could content the same type of groups. For example, on your website, you are selling men's clothes and women's clothes, and you want to make sure that all the things that have been purchased or all the users who view a particular blog are grouped inside one thing for men and are grouped one thing for women and one for others if you want that. And to do the same thing, we have something similar in GA4 too. However, implementing that in Google Tag Manager is completely the same. You just have to add a content underscore group, and it will group all of the things that you are sending to GA4 in one event. So you can add content group as men's clothes, and then in GA4 you will have this parameter as an event parameter, and you can see all the different reports based on that. So for example, if you are sending different if you're sending purchase events and all of them has this content group in them, for anything, it can be men's clothes or whatever, you can uh, go to event name, add a secondary dimension for that content group, and you will be able to see that here inside your reports, or you can build a custom report for that. So the content grouping also works the same way. We talked about user ID already. You cannot send actual user information. You can only send hashed information, or you can only send random user generated things. If the user ID is not present, by default, it will give all the users a client ID. Client ID is the same thing that we talked about earlier. It is uh, this cookie that will be associated with each user. In Universal Analytics, if we wanted to create a view that was basically for all the users, which has user ID, we had to create a separate view, and it will show up here under user ID view or user explorer. However, that is different in GA4. In GA4, you have to build a custom report for that. If you will go to Explore tab, hit Template Gallery, and then look for a report called User Explorer. We don't have it. All right, so this report is very much similar to what we might have in GA4. However, in this one, it is these reports have been having errors since yesterday. However, these GA4 reports, they have a similar thing called app client ID, which you can use as a user ID if you don't have a particular one configured for any user. It's called I don't think we have. One more thing, if the user is signed into your website, it will automatically attach a user ID to all the events that the user might have. So if the user is signed into the website with a user ID and they do 10 different events, you can see all of those events in a separate tab. You can add all the users' behavior into the reports. We should be able to see the reports, but they have been having errors since yesterday, or maybe a day before that. Parameters, they are very similar to what we had in Universal Analytics. We talked about the parameters and how you can configure the parameters in Google Tag Manager. You just need to add all of them in events parameters, and they will be sent as custom dimensions here. However, if you send a new dimension, let's say you are sending dimension _1 to GA4, the event will be received inside your GA4, but it will not show up under any of the reports. You have to configure that dimension first in order to see that dimension inside your reports, or to use that dimension inside your custom reports. So make sure that you have configured the custom dimension, and then you are also sending that custom dimension some kind of value when you are configuring Google Tag Manager or the default GTag code for that one. The user properties, we already talked about it. It is very similar to how we had user properties for Google Analytics, Universal Analytics. However, in Universal Analytics, we could only send the user ID. We could not have more options to send user parameters. But in GA4, we can build as many as user properties as we want. I think in this one, they are using two, member level and member. And the last one is event batching. So for example, when more than one event fire at the same time in Google Analytics 4, instead of sending two different requests back to Google Analytics 4, what GA4 does is batch both of those requests into one event. So even though there are two different events that has fired on the website, it will only send one request to GA4, and that one request will track both of those events. So if a page view event fires and a session start event fire and a view content event fires on the website, and all three of them fire at the same time, GA4 will batch all of those events together and then send those events back to Google Analytics. So there will be only one hit. This is useful when you are tracking everything through server containers, because server container cost more if you use more bandwidth, and this method helps us with reducing the load that we are sending through the server. So if we send three different requests, then it will use three times more bandwidth than using one request when we are using content event batching in GA4. All right. Do we have any questions so far between any differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics? If you have any question, you can unmute yourself or you can ask the question in chat. In GA4, okay, so we have three questions. One is that the difference in attribution model between GA4 and Universal Analytics. In Universal Analytics, we only had one attribution model, that was last click. However, in GA4, we do get the option to pick the attribution model. If you will go to advertising section of this, the UI, and you will go to conversion path. Conversion path or conversion model, both of them work in kind of the same way. You will get the option to see different data models based on last click, first click, linear, or time decay. However, the only difference it really shows is when you have selected last click or data driven, or if you have selected linear. So this shows a different touch point of the user which has visited your website to different medium or different devices. So some users visited through organic search, and then their second touch point was also organic, and then these are all the users who made purchase or the conversion event on the website. So the attribution model in GA4 is somewhat similar to the data driven by default, but you can switch it however you want to see different reports that you want inside GA4. This option is only available in conversion path, and hopefully they will make it a lot easier for us to navigate. But right now we only have the default channel grouping, and we don't have any option to build a custom grouping so far. The transaction values should not be different in GA4 and Universal Analytics. The only difference can be in Universal Analytics, it accepts integers. That means if the user made a purchase of $49.99, it usually rounds off to 50. That is how it is configured at the back end. However, it still accepts the float values, but in GA4, it accepts floats by default. So if you will make a test conversion on your website and go to configure to see the exact value of those conversions and switch to debug view, this is where you can see what events are firing when you are testing everything inside the debug. Debug view only works when you have connected your Google Tag Manager container with your website. So it seemed like someone was doing some events in the testing. So if you will go to event item tabs, these are all where your items have been configured. So this is a view promotion event. So this does not have a value. Let's see if there is an event which has a value. No, it does not. So anyhow, if there is if there is an event which has a value in that, then it takes that value up to 4 different decimal points. However, no, there should not be a difference in revenue in GA4 or Universal Analytics. They should be pretty much the same. And if you are checking revenue after 72 hours, because there is a time gap where GA4 can accept a transaction after the 74 hours. How to track the transaction values in GA4? In order to track the transaction values in GA4, whenever the event fires, you need to send an event parameter called value and attach whatever value you want to send. For example, if you want to send a value of 1 whenever an event file, you can hard code that here. Or if you wanted to take any value from the data layer, you can add a data layer variable from your Google Tag Manager container. However, yes, you just need to add a value parameter, and whatever that value parameter will have, this will be counted as the value or the revenue of that particular event. There is one issue with the revenue. When you are viewing your reports inside your Google Analytics 4, you will observe that the value is only displayed for the purchase event. All the other events that might have value, that is not displayed by default. However, when you will select a particular event and go to a detailed view report, so for example, if you are here on the events tab and scroll down to the events report table, so click on any of the events that where you might be sending a value, you will see that you will be able to see the event value there of whatever the event value you are sending for that particular event. Okay, that should answer the question. May I know what's the difference between GA4 and GA360? GA360, GA360 is just the paid version of Google Analytics. This is for businesses which has more higher needs. So in GA4 by default, it gives us access to 25 custom dimensions. However, in GA360, we don't have any limitations on custom dimensions, custom matrices. We can use reports based on users' first sessions and conversion based on event names. So in reality, GA360 and GA4, they are not much different. It's just 360 is a lot more powerful and can handle more data than GA4. Yes, GA360 can track both app and web applications because GA360 is similar to how GA4 works. Okay, we have one more question. So inside report acquisition, in acquisition, we have two different reports. One is called user acquisition and one is called traffic acquisition. The user acquisition reports, these are based off of users' first interaction. So a user can visit our website more than once, and these reports are built on users' first interaction. So these are all the attribution in this one is first click based. So anything that happened on the first session of that particular users, these are all the conversions that are linked here are based on first session. However, traffic ones are based on last user session or the last click attribution model. So this one is based on last click one, and the user acquisition ones are based on first click model. However, you can choose different model inside the advertising tab. Awesome. Do we have any other questions? All right, let's continue then. So now we understand somewhat what are the main differences between Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics. We can actually go into GA4 and see the interface and where we can find different reports that we might have in Universal Analytics that we are trying to find in GA4. All right, so the first off, we have the home page. The home page is where you can see some generic information about all the events that are firing on the website. It has a small snippet for real-time views, and then it has some other information like the total users on the website and things like that. It also displays the revenue here. This tab at the bottom, which says recently viewed, this is all the custom reports or all the things that you have recently done on the website. So the last thing I visited was traffic acquisition report. So it is showing me the traffic acquisition report here. And previously that we visited the user acquisition and then event name and then events. So these are the things that are recently viewed. Inside these are called insights. These insights are built of These insights are built from the machine learning algorithm that GA4 works on, and this helps us build custom audiences, custom reports, so we can see what kind of conversions, what kind of things we can do to improve our conversions on the website. You can click on View All Insights, and it will show you all the insights. If you will go to Configure, and let's say you have created a particular audience from this insight, so it will show that audience under Audience tab, Configure, and then Audience, and it has a 3-star kind of thing right before that one. So you will know that these conversions were built from the Insight tab. These were not uh, someone who manually configured them. So these are the conversions which were built from that insight tool that GA4 offers. All right. So next, after the home tab, we have real-time view, and real-time view is very different from universal analytics, because uh, just because how the real-time API works differently than universal analytics. So it shows all the things that has happened in last 30 minutes. First user session, audiences, all the events that are firing in. You can select a particular event to see what kind of parameters it is sending with that particular event. So some event parameters are built in, like GA session ID or GA session number, but some things are custom coded, like all data or page location or page and things like that. And all the things inside the real-time view, they are processed almost within 5 to 10 minutes inside the reports, inside the built-in reports. However, the custom reports need at least 24 hours before you can build any custom report for any data. However, it is always advisable to see any report that you are looking in GA4 prior to 24 hours. Give GA4 about 24 hours to process any data that you are sending to GA4, and then see all the reports after 24 hours. However, if you're testing things, just use the configure tab and go to debug view for any kind of testing of the events that you are not sure how they are working. So any test event, you just go to debug view and then make sure all the events are firing properly inside here. All right. So we have two different report section. One is called reports, and then one is called explore. Reports is where you can see all the built-in reports that Google Analytics 4 has to offer. There are not much, they're just some few reports. So the user acquisition overview, this is very similar to what we had in GA4 called acquisition reports. So all these major 8 tabs, they have been compromised into these 3 reports. In your GA4, you will only be able to see acquisition overview, user acquisition, and traffic acquisition. The difference between user acquisition and traffic acquisition is how the attribution model is different. This one is based off first user interaction, and this is the overall second interaction based on last click model. And we talked about it. If you want to look at a different attribution model, you can go to advertising section. However, in GA4, one of the most common report that we want to see is how your Google Ads is doing with Universal Analytics. So in Universal Analytics, we had a report under Google Ads section called campaigns, where we can see different campaigns and how they are doing, how much revenue they are generating. A similar report can be viewed under the acquisition overview. You can click on your view Google Ads campaign, and then it will take you to the similar report that you had inside your Universal Analytics. This one, similar report can be seen inside GA4. So it will show you that which Google Ads campaign is generating how much revenue for that particular campaign or for that particular advertisement on your website. You can have more than one ad account linked to your GA4. I think GA4 has an option to link with up to 100 accounts. However, similarly, in order to see these rewards, you need to make sure that your Universal Analytics account is linked with your ad account under Google Ad links. Similarly, in GA4, you also need to make sure that your GA4 account is linked with your Google Ads account. However, just linking it with your ad account will not show you all the reports. You have to accept the remarketing conditions for GA4. So that is covered inside Google Signals. So you can go to data settings and data collections, and then you have to agree to all the data collection things. So this will enable your GA4 for remarketing. Any audiences that you will create in your Google Analytics 4 account, they will be available for your remarketing audiences in GA4. This one has been implemented considering the user privacy policy and the user concerns for their privacy. So by default, GA4 does not pick all the information about a particular user like it used to do. So for example, if a user signed into the website and their email address was present at the time of the sign-in, GA4 Universal Analytics will pick that information to map that particular user with its database. However, GA4 does not do that anymore. You have to agree with all the condition in order for the Google Analytics to track all the basic information about that particular user and use that for remarketing purposes. If you have not agreed to this one, you cannot use GA4 audiences for remarketing inside your Google Ads. You can still track all the things in GA4, but you will not be able to use any of that information for remarketing. That is somewhat not necessary if you are using Google Ads conversion tag, but if you're importing all the conversions from GA4, then you need to make sure that Google Signals are enabled. Right now, we cannot do much with Google Signals right now. We can only create remarketing audiences, but in future, Google is saying that we can use Google Signals for creating custom reports and utilizing this data inside GA4. However, we don't really know that how the data may look like because we did not have access to Google Signals right now. Anyhow, back to the acquisition reports. So you also might see that there is a difference between the reports that you see under Universal Analytics. For example, in this one, for the same date range, the total revenue generated by your Google Ads can be different from the total revenue generated by your GA4. The total revenue that GA4 has recorded inside in its report for Google Ads, that is only different because the attribution model is different for both GA4 and Universal Analytics, and it measures things differently. That's just it. Everything else is normal. So right now in Universal Analytics, it says that it has generated roughly around 8,000. Let's go to all conversions. Let's see e-commerce. So it has generated about 8,800 revenue in Universal Analytics, and in GA4 it has generated about 7,100 total revenue from the ad campaigns. So some of the revenue that was generated under Google Ads, it is not linked back to the actual campaign in GA4. Therefore, it is important that you make sure that your UTM parameters are working fine. There is some issue with the UTM parameters of GA4 too. It does not account for UTM keyword, UTM content, and UTM term. Only UTM parameters that are working in GA4 are UTM source, UTM medium, and UTM ID and UTM campaign. So these are the 4 parameters that are working in GA4. UTM term campaign are not working in term content are not working in GA4. It is important to know that because when we are configuring our Facebook pixel and Facebook ads, we used to use the UTM term and UTM content for sending the ad group ID or ad group ID or ad ID, but we cannot do that. We cannot do that to see the report here in GA4. They say that they are fixing it, but that hasn't been implemented in GA4. So GA4, you can think of Google Analytics 4 as an upgrade from Universal Analytics, but it is very incomplete right now. It is still getting a lot more updates almost every other day. Then we have the user acquisition report. The user acquisition reports are based on first user interaction. So anything that you are going to see here, they are based on first user interaction of your website. We only have right now. We only have the option option of default channel grouping. We don't have the option for custom channel grouping yet. However, they have expanded the list of default channel grouping by a lot. Previously, we only had, I think, 6 different default channel grouping options. However, now we have a long list of channel grouping that you can use for. So we have paid videos, social paid, and things like that. You just need to make sure that when your conversion event fires, you are passing that information with your Google Tag Manager. So when the user hits your Google Ads or Facebook ads, you are using the right UTM medium parameter. So if you wanted it to be display, you have to send display, banner, or expandable, and it will count that as display ad. So make sure that your UTM medium parameter, something like this, UTM underscore medium, it is equal to banner, display, or anything. If you want it to show as display, if you want it to show as paid ad, it should be either paid PPC or CPC or something like that. Then there is a traffic acquisition report. A traffic acquisition is based on the whole user session. GA4 considers that there can be cross attribution and cross device session. So a user can have a different session on different devices. So it take an account for that inside traffic acquisition reports and try to build what it thinks is that one of the best model for tracking a particular session. So by default, you can switch all the primary dimensions from here. So the default one, it is showing you based on channel grouping. However, you can switch it to session source to see all the users based on source. If you want to add any campaign, you can hit plus and add a secondary dimension to that, and you can see where that particular user is coming from, or see any other dimension that you want to see with this particular report. So if you are working with digital marketing and your main concern is just to see where the traffic is coming from and which advertising platform is doing better, you're going to be spending most of your time here. You will be looking at source report, and then you will have a secondary dimension called under session acquisition of medium. Or if you want to see campaign information, you can switch it with campaign to see which campaign is generating more revenue for you. Or if you only want to see campaign data, you can switch that from here. You can switch it to campaign to see which campaign is bringing how much revenue for you. So if for a digital marketing person, this is the most of the time where you are going to spend. We do have some other option to build the same report in Explorer tab or use Google Data Studio to pull the information from Google Analytics 4 and build a dashboard there. So it is entirely up to you how you want to review any of the reports that you want. Yeah, next we have engagement. So we talked about that Google Analytics 4 is more event based. So everything that happens in GA4 is an event. Page view is an event, session start is an event, purchase is an event, user events are events. Anything that the user is doing on your website, whether it is in interactive or non-interactive, it is recorded as an event. So the overview section shows you the overview of the total event section. So it has recorded 3.2 million events from 500,000 users. And these are all the name of the events, and this is on which pages the events are firing. So if you will hit view events, it will take you to this event report. If you will hit view page screens, it will take you to view page screens. Same thing in acquisition report. If you will scroll down from where we went to the Google Ads report, if you will scroll down to see the one below before that one, it is view traffic acquisition. It will take you to the traffic reports, and user acquisition will take you to user acquisition reports. So it is just the overview is just a shortcut to all the other reports. It's just and a summary. It has one summary table on the top and then shortcuts at the bottom of the screen. All right. So all the events that are happening on your website, you can view them either from view events, or you can go to this event report in order to see all the events that are firing on your website. Scrolling a little down, you can see the name of the events that are firing on the website. You can select one of the events, or if you want to see more reports, more rows, you can select more rows and it will show you all the events that are firing on the website. You can select a different date range from the top to see events from a particular type. If you wanted to add a custom dimension, a custom segment. So in GA4, let's say you wanted to, if you are in overview tab and if you wanted to compare all the users who are, let's say all the users who are in USA. So you would create a segment for that, and you can hit new to create a segment. And in this segment, you have to define some particular condition for that particular user. So that condition can be anything like country. In our example, the country equals United States. So this is USA audience. So let's hit save. So now it will show, it will segment all the reports based on USA audience. And if you want to see a comparison with all users, you will just import both of them. And now it will show you, now it will show the whole reports based on the comparison between all users and your USA users. So all the one in blue, these are traffic coming from USA, and all the other ones, these are traffic from the whole website. So it will filter out all the reports based on that. We have a similar thing in GA4. You can hit add comparison, and then it will show you different options that you can use. So you can do the same thing. You can hit country, and you can select what country you want to filter it out for. We can do United States, hit OK. You can add more than one condition if you want, but let's just see how the USA traffic is doing with in comparison to the all traffic. So now the all one is in blue, and the United States is in orange. So it will show you all the events based on these two different parameters. So all users did 681 events, and 295K events were from United States users. You have the option to add up to 4 comparisons, similar to how we had an option to add 4 comparison in Universal Analytics. So the comparison is pretty much similar to how we had the segmentations in GA4. It's just called comparison in GA4. So you will get to see all the reports here if you want. Let's remove the comparison and see all the reports. So now you have all the reports of the events. So these are all the events that are firing on your website. Now, if you want to see a one particular event on one particular event, let's say you want to see how your begin checkout event is doing on your website. So once you will click on an event, it will open a detailed report of that particular event. And in this report, you can see all the data that is coming from the real-time view. So this report is from real-time view. And if you will scroll down, and if you had any custom dimensions for this particular event, they will also show up at the bottom of the page. So they had custom dimensions of page referral, page location, page title. So they are showing up there. So these are all the page referral from where the user is making, coming to the thank you page and making a purchase. This is the pages on which the purchase, the begin checkout event is firing. This is the title of the page where the event is firing. You can click on the event to switch between different events that you have recorded on your website. So you can switch to select event. Select event is similar to how we had product click event in Universal Analytics. This will tell you that how many users are clicking on a particular event. They have not configured the select event on their website, so we don't get any information about this user, about this event. You see that in the previous event we had page title here, and at the bottom of the screen we had page location and page referral. However, this event is not sending those custom dimensions, so we don't get to see those custom dimensions here in this report. So any custom dimension, if you are sending it back to GA4, you will be able to see that a custom dimension inside this detailed event report. So if you will switch to add to cart, and if we are tracking add to cart in this demo account, and this is sending any custom dimensions with this one, you will be able to see the custom dimensions at the bottom of the screen. So any custom dimensions that are being sent, they will be available to see inside a particular report. So this one is sending page title, page location, page referral, and session keywords. The session keyword is something that is being sent with this particular event. So therefore, the session keyword is also attached to this particular report. If the session keyword was not being sent through Google Tag Manager when the event is firing, or through the G tag, however your event setup has been done, then it will not be able to see that particular keyword or any of the information here. Next, we get pages and screen. This is how you are going to see your page views report. So if you want to see, uh, uh, in the beginning, we saw how we can build a landing page report from this one. You just need to select a session start event, and then it will show you all the landing pages one. However, it will not have all the built-in reports like these ones. It will not have all the built-in reports that we had here. For any built-in reports that you need for any more analysis, you have to build them uh, inside the Explore tab in GA4. GA4 can be buggy from time to time, but it is still under maintenance, and it is getting a lot more updates. So hopefully things will get more smoother when we will finally shift from Universal Analytics to GA4. Universal Analytics is going to be there for 1 more year. And if we get a new client, we usually configure Universal Analytics and GA4, both of them. And we mainly rely on Universal Analytics for all kind of tracking information. We are just populating GA4 with all the data. So once we shift from Universal Analytics to GA4, the algorithm will know that what is the user behavior on the website, what is the conversion, and all the other things. The next tab is monetization. Monetization is where you are going to see your e-commerce events, such as purchase event that are firing on the website. Similarly, if you will switch to overview tab, you will see a basic summary of all the events. So it has recorded 1.6K conversions, average conversions, where the which item names are being purchased the most, and all the other information that is being sent to this GA4. The difference between e-commerce purchases and in-app purchases is that e-commerce purchases are everything that is happening on your website, and anything that is being recorded from your web stream. And in-app purchases is everything that is being recorded from your either Android applications or Apple iOS applications. So anything that is being tracked for purchase event inside your mobile application will be in-app purchases, and anything that will be tracked on your website using the Google Tag Manager or GA4 will be counted as e-commerce purchase events. So in e-commerce purchase event, you can filter the reports based on the item name. You can select item ID, anything that information that you are sending back to GA4, you can see that. If you want to see what kind of parameters you can send back to GA4, you can look up the documentation. They have a list of things that we can send back when the purchase event fire. So this is all the information that you can send back to GA4. You can send quantity, location ID, what was the variant, what was the brand of item, what was the item category, what was list ID. List ID is which it belongs to. For example, a product can be men t-shirt and it belongs to men's category. So men's list ID would be that. Item variation. So you can send all this information, and in GA4 custom reports, built-in reports, you can select things based on item ID, item name, item category 5, or item brand based on that. If you want to build a similar report that we had in here for the transaction ID, where you would go to conversions, e-commerce, sales performance, we had a built-in report which gives us information about the transaction based on the transaction ID. So this transaction ID brought this much revenue. Let me remove this. So it is a list of transaction ID and how much revenue one particular transaction made on the website. To build this kind of report, you have to use Explore tab to build a custom report for that, because that report is not available by default either. And if you are sending some user parameters, you can see all the user reports here. This is very similar to how we had audience report in Universal Analytics, where you can see different details about the users on your website. You can view report based on countries. You can view report based on cities. and you can view a report based on interest. So if you will click any of those, it will expand that report and it will show you, it will switch to demographic details, and it will show you that report based on whatever parameter you have selected. So Canada is bringing 4,000 users and they have made 4,600 revenue on the website and stuff like that. The tech is similar to what user is using to navigate your website, what device they're using, whether they are on mobile applications or whether they are using desktop applications. So you can use this one. We don't have, this demo account does not have any app integration. So all the users that are coming to this GA4, they are all coming from the web streams. You can click on their operating system to see 26K users are using Windows and stuff like that. Once you will click on any of the report, it will switch to tech details report, and it will populate this report with whatever parameter you had selected in tech overview section. So right now, this one is based on operating system, and this is showing all the report from where the user is visiting the Google store. Some are visiting from PlayStation 4, some are visiting from iOS, Macintosh, and stuff like that. So yeah, that is pretty much the overview of the reports that we have in Universal Analytics. Does anyone have any question related to any of the reports, or how any report is different from Universal Analytics, or if they are not sure, if they want to see what particular report we had in Universal Analytics, how we can view that report in GA4? If anyone have any questions so far, they can ask. All right, if we don't have any question, we can go ahead. I wanted to review the custom report section. However, that is not working very well. However, we can try to build one more custom report to see if that is working fine. If that is working fine, we will have a look at few reports such as e-commerce reports and some funnels to just see how we can build different reports. If they are not working fine, we will see what we can do. All right, I think we can work with this e-commerce report for now. All right, so if you need to build, let me refresh the page. There is event count here. All right, so in GA4, most of the time that you're going to spend on reports, that is going to be through these custom reports that we have inside GA4. So it is important that you understand how you can build custom report for yourself, or if you are more comfortable working with Google Data Studio, you can use Google Data Studio to build similar reports that we have inside in GA4 in Google Data Studio. So now when you will create a report, you will see that there are two things. One is called variables and one is called tab settings. So anything that you are seeing here inside this report, this source, medium, action, and everything, this is being configured through this tab settings. So if you want to have different rows, you can select different rows from here. If you want to have a column section where you want to see different comparison, you can have a column drop down section here. If you want to see any matrices, if you want to see any values next to each row, you can add that under a values section. So values can only be matrices, and rows and columns can be dimensions only. And if you want to add any filter to this particular report, let's say you only wanted to see users who are coming from USA, you can add a filter based on country and select that to contains the United States, and it will filter all the reports based on that. So if you will select United States, it will filter all the reports and remove all the other countries and only had the users who are making conversion from the United States. However, this variable tab, so anything that you have inside tab section, it has to be imported inside the variable first. So you can see this active users, you can see this event count, you can see this conversion. In order to use this conversion, you have to import the conversion inside matrix first, and then use that inside conversion. So let's say you want to see a different number like add to cart, checkout, and you want to see item views. You want to see these reports. You want to see these matrices inside this report. So first thing you need to do is that import whatever things you want, and then you can either drop them down here, like select and drop it, or you can click on it and then select checkout, or then select view item to have that thing populate here on this too. So if there was any add to cart, checkout, add to cart event or checkout event inside this GA4, it will start to populate these reports. If your e-commerce events are not configured correctly, then they will not show any data here. So the checkout event is being configured properly, but add to cart is not configured properly. So therefore it is not showing any event information here. So we can remove it for right now. So let's say you want to build a similar report to this one where you can see transaction IDs and you want to see revenue, tax, shipping, and quantity of the products that has been purchased. So the first thing you need to do is you need to import the transaction ID parameter. So this is the custom one. This is the e-commerce one. I'm not sure why they have a custom transaction ID, but we can see if both of them are different or not. So we have a transaction ID and we don't need source and medium anymore because we are trying to build a similar report to this one where we have the transaction ID. Let's use the default one. So now we have a transaction ID and it is showing us 99,000 users did the transaction. It does not have a transaction ID and did not make any purchase. So we don't want to see any event which has a purchase revenue of 0. So we are going to exclude all the events which does not have a value more than of 1. So we can remove all the events for which the purchase revenue equals 0. We need to exclude it, not include it. This should be fine. So anything which has a revenue greater than 0, it will show up in the report. So now this is a very similar report to what we have inside Universal Analytics, where we have the transaction ID. So the transaction ID is here, and it is showing this was made by one user, one event, one count, and they made one transaction with this one. And now let's say we want to see what was the total number of quantity that the user bought. We can go to metrics and we can import the e-commerce quantity, and it will show us that how much was the total quantity of this particular event. So this user bought 5 items, this bought 3 items, this bought 2. So this is the kind of the similar report that we had in Universal Analytics that we are looking up here. If you want to see more rows, you can go to show more rows and select more rows, and then it will show you more rows based on whatever number you have selected here. So to overview, anything that you are seeing in this table, it is coming from this tab settings things. In the tab setting, we have different options. We can change the visualization from chart to pie chart, or we can use line graph if we want to see that. However, these ones have limited options. You can only see one particular thing when you are switching from one report to another report. The visualization, this report is called a free-form report, and right now it is showing us only active users. If we want to add more things, we can add that event count, transactions, event quantity, and if we wanted to add revenue, we can import the revenue from here. E-commerce revenue. So e-commerce revenue is the total number of revenue that has been generated from this particular purchase. All the filter has been removed because we switched the report, so therefore this one is back again. We can add the filter again to exclude this one where e-commerce revenue is only greater than 0. So it will remove all the ones for which the revenue is less than 0. So once you have built a report and you want to share this report with the other team members, you can hit on the share button here, or you can go back to the report sections, and then you can hit uh, the three icons, the three dot icon, and then hit share, and it will only be shared with all the users who have administrator access or analytics access to this Google Analytics 4 property. All the reports that are only shared with you will have this one person icon, and if it is shared with other people, it will have this icon. This shared report, they are read only. That means the other person who is going to share, who is going to view your report, they will not have an option to edit this report, change date range, or do anything with this custom report. If they want to use this report, they have to build a copy of this existing report and then do their own editing or analysis that they want. So this is what is called a free form report, where you can import anything. Basically, if you wanted to see, let's say you don't want to see transaction ID, you are more interested to see what kind of source is bringing more revenue for you. So the first thing you need to do is import source and medium from your of into the variable, so you can use that in the report. So let's say we want to see the source and medium report inside this one. We are not interested to look at the transaction ID. We want to see which source produced how much revenue. So we can import source and medium report here, source and medium variable, and now it will show us the same report based on source and medium. So Google Organic produced 99K, Google CPC produced 10K, Bing produced 230K. And now if we wanted to import a campaign variable, we can hit a plus on the dimension and import campaign. The Google Ads campaign, this one is very specific to Google Ads only. However, the campaign, this is pulling data from UTM campaign. So if you have configured UTM campaign parameter, it will pull that data from there. So all the campaigns, if they have any UTM campaign thing, they will populate. Otherwise, they will be not set for the other ones. So they have configured the UTM parameter one, so we can see those information here based on these reports. So this is the free form report. You can build any kind of report that you want. This is very similar to how we have tables inside Google Data Studio. So you can use this report for any quick thing. All right, we have one more question. They are asking that if we go to the admin section and update the reporting attribution models, how it will affect the reports under user acquisition and traffic acquisition. The user acquisition reports, they are not going to be affected by the settings that you will do under the admin. It is only the traffic acquisition report that will be affected. So by default, uh, the traffic acquisition reports, they are the last click or data driven. So if you will update that inside the admin section, then they will get updated to whatever you do. But the default one, the users acquisition reports, they will not get changed. They will always be based on first user interaction. They will not update. uh, the attribution model for these one will not get updated. Only the traffic acquisitions is the one for which the attribution model will get updated. This is important for people who have different touch points. For example, they are running advertising campaign, they are running discovery campaign on Facebook, and then they are running remarketing campaign on Google Ads, and they want to make sure that their attribution model is correct. Previously, we were very much limited in Google Analytics because it only reported the last attribution model, but in GA4 you can actually see different attribution model under advertising tab. So you don't really need to change the attribution model for the whole GA4. You can just go to advertising and select different attribution and see what is the difference between both the attribution models that you might have. this is using a model conversion, which is uh, one thing generated from the which is generated from a machine learning algorithm. So this one is based on last click model, and this one is based on data driven. So you can compare two different models if you want to, but that is entirely up to you. I would not recommend uh, changing the defaults of GA4. You can, if you want, if it is just for the analysis purposes, you can use the last click model, or compare it with linear click model, or compare it with first click model, however you want inside the model conversion. This reporting, this attribution model is generated by the machine learning algorithm. That means it is not 100% accurate, but it is somewhat accurate. This is more like a guess generated by a machine learning algorithm based on the user data that it has captured across different sessions and across different devices. Do we have any other questions? I hope this answers the questions. So, yeah, sure. All right. Under Explore, there is one more report that we want to see. For example, in GA4, you had one important report, which was shopping behavior, where you could see where the user, the all sessions of the user, and then how many products they viewed, add to cart, checkout, and then finally how much they paid. So you can see actually a funnel kind of view. To see the similar view, we have funnel exploration reports. So in these reports, we can build funnels for all the data that we might have in GA4. You can switch to different reports from just tab setting. Previously, we were looking at free form reports. You can switch to funnel exploration, path exploration, or user lifetime. User lifetime is something which is based on user ID, which we were previously talking about. So by default, it is showing us breakdown based off category. We don't want that. We can remove the breakdown. So now it is showing us first user session and how many were organic visitors, then how many did the session start event, how many viewed things, and then how many users finally made a purchase. You might see that in Universal Analytics, it is also accounting some other events which did not fall under this session. For example, the one which is the bigger bar, this is all the events, this 58% users, these are the ones which followed the funnel. However, this small chunk, this 8 sessions that we had with transaction, these are the ones which did not follow this funnel. So to incorporate all the other events, you can make the funnel open. So what it will do is that it will look at all the events that has fired on GA4, and then it will build a report based on that. You can edit all the steps from here. You can click edit on this one, remove anything that you don't want. We don't want to see first one. We don't want to see organic. We might be interested in session start. And let's say you have a lead generation website where you are interested to see how many events are firing, or how your particular funnel is doing. So maybe you are sending a user to a landing page, then the user is going to a checkout page, and finally making a conversion. You can track that here. The name of the purchase event is different here. So if you want to add a new step or a new condition, for let's say we can do one from the start. So the first thing is session start, where the user has started the session. Now we want to add a next step to this one. We want to see if they have let's say if they had made a purchase to the website or not. So we want to see if the user has landed to the website and if they had made a purchase or not. You can add a condition by hitting add a new condition. You can either select anything from the list below, or you can type the name of the event for which you want to see. So as soon as you will start typing an event, if the event already exists, it will show up here. If the event does not exist, it will ask you to create an event. The purchase event already exists, so we are going to select that purchase event. We can rename this step to purchase, and we can hit apply. So now it will show us a funnel where all the users has done a session start event, and then they have made a purchase. So about 1.8% users have made a purchase on the website from which done a session start event. So that is roughly 1.7K users. This option will tell you how much time they had spent on each step of the funnel. So it takes a user roughly 2 days and 9 hours from session start event to make a purchase on the website. So this is showing you an average time from the previous step. If we add another step in between them, then it will change the time from that particular step to the next one. The abandonment is how many user abandoned from this to this one. And you can again add filter to the same report. You can only look at the user who are coming from USA, or you can look at the users who only speak English language, or you can track all the users who are only using Apple iOS 14 devices. But in order to use that, you need to make sure that you import that particular dimension or that particular metric first, and then you can make any kind of changes that you want here. So these are the funnel exploration report, and then there is a freeform report. The path exploration report is very different from what we had in Universal Analytics, because in GA4, everything is based off of events, not like in Universal Analytics, where some things can be based off of sessions and something can be something else. In GA4, everything starts with the session start event, and you can just hit, if you want to see where a particular user is going, you can just click on any event and just drill down to see where the user actually lands, to see a particular behavior of that user. If you want to build a user lifetime report, you can click on user lifetime report, and it will show you all the events based on the user ID or the client ID, and all the events that the user is doing on the website. Let's see if we can import a row for these ones. Maybe they have limited the demo account so that we cannot use the user report. Let me switch to a different account where we might have some user data, and we can see that report. A user report is very much similar to how we had the other reports inside Universal Analytics, where we can see what events a particular user is doing for and how many sessions that they had in a particular day or a particular device. So yeah, it's called App Instant ID. So these are all the users which are using the client ID. Client ID is which is a randomly generated number by Google. And this is a unique ID that was generated by the CMS of the website. So if the user logged into the website, we can see that particular event. I had a filter so that I could only see the conversions that were firing on this one. So if you will select a particular event, let's say this particular user, so this is uniquely identified by a random string of number, but I can match this, the client can match this ID with their backend to see who this user actually was. And if we have any user parameters, we are sending with any event. So we can see their first event when they started the website, they clicked on something, they did a session start event, then they did some more thing, then they signed up to the website. So you see that before this sign up event, all of these events were under client ID. They did not sign up, so therefore this ID was not generated for this particular user. But they were visiting the website, then they signed up to the website, and as soon as they sign up, this user ID was generated, and this was attached with this sign up event. And when this sign up, this Firebase ID was attached to this one, it linked all the previous events to this particular ID. So if this user had some more sessions in GA4 in last 72 hours, it would have automatically linked all of them to this client ID. So all the next events that they did after one day, they were still counted as the same user ID. So we can actually see each user behavior if we had the user ID, if we wanted to do some more in-depth research to see how the user is actually going to the sign up event, or what links they are clicking before they go to the sign up event, which pages they are viewing before going to the event, and stuff like that. So this is the user explorer report that we can use to explore one particular user on the website. Okay, let's go back to the demo account. Anyone have any questions so far? They can ask if anyone has any questions. These are the custom reports that we build, and custom reports are something that you are going to use a lot to build some more things in GA4. We talked about Google Signals in the beginning and how we can connect Google Signals with how Google Signals are used to connect Google Analytics 4 with Google Ads account. They are important so that we can use remarketing and advertising features and cross-device reports. These are not yet available, but soon will be. Uh, we cannot use GA4, we cannot Google Signals right now. We cannot export them to BigQuery. We cannot build any dashboard for them. We cannot use them in Google Data Studio. But these are the things that has been promised by Google that they will be launched soon. Hopefully by the end of this year. However, right now we can only use Google Signals for Google Ads. There is one issue with Google Ads and Google Analytics for audiences that we talked earlier, that we talked about earlier. That is, whenever you are going to create an audience in your GA4 account, if you will create an audience in your GA4 account and you will see that in your Google Ads, you have that audience, your Google Ads will say that, all right, we got 4 different audience lists from GA4. But when you will create a remarketing audience from that GA4 audience, it will not populate anything for some reasons. It is taking a lot more time than in GA4. So in GA4, if you will go to configure, and then you will go to audiences, you will see that you have different audiences created for you. The default one is called purchase audience. However, if you want to create different audiences, you can just hit on create, and it will just ask you what conditions you want your audiences to have, and then you can use that conditions to create uh, any kind of audience that you might want it. It is very similar to how we built the conditions in steps in the funnel report. So you will see this button, the button which says new audiences. You will click on new audience and you can create some built-in audience that they have, or you can create one from the productive section. Else you can create a custom audiences. Let's say you want to create an audience which is coming from USA. So you want to select demographic. No, I think it was country. So you can select a particular condition if you want to add, and you can select more than one condition, or you can add more than one parameter. So let's say you want to add all the users. So right now it only has PK. That is me doing all the testing on the website. So it will contain only all the audience which are coming from Pakistan. PK is short for that. If you want to exclude any audience, you can add there. So let's say I don't want to add any audience which has made a purchase event. So purchase is not an event here right now. So I can hit create event and it will create a purchase event. So I want to target all the users who has visited my website and are from Pakistan, but who had not made a purchase on the website. So I can rename this audience to Pakistan non-purchase. So I can use this audience to remarket it inside Google Ads, or I can use this audience to make any kind of analysis in GA4. So this audience will start populating any data after it has been created. So it will not have any information prior to the date it has been created to. One important thing that we missed is the conversion. So in your Universal Analytics account, if you want to create a conversion, you have to create a goal for that. So goal is equivalent to a conversion in Universal Analytics. However, in GA4, it is a lot more easier. So in configure, you can go to event section, and under event section, all the events that you are tracking will show up here. So any event that you have tracked inside your GA4 will show up under a list inside here. I don't think I have used this Universal Analytics property for anything. Anyhow, under the events, we can use the demo account for that. There is a toggle button for marking anything as a conversion. So once you will mark this as a conversion, it will show up in conversion, and that's pretty much it. You just need to mark an event as a conversion and it will be counted as a conversion. If you don't want to mark an event as a conversion, you can go to your conversion events and then just uncheck that event. So once you have unchecked an event, it will not be counted as a conversion anymore. And GA4 also has options to modify events or create events. So for example, if you have if you are already tracking, let's say, purchase event, and you want to create a new event from that purchase event, so you can hit create. It will ask you a few things. What is the name of the event that you wanted to have? So let's say we are already tracking purchase event, and I want to track a purchase event which is more than $100. All right. So I am making a new event which is called purchase underscore 100. So I will know that this is all the purchase event which had revenue more than $100. So for this one, I am asking it to look at the existing event which is purchase, and it should have a condition where the value should be greater than 100. So what this will do is that it will create a custom event where the purchase event is all the purchase event that are being tracked in the future and has a revenue more than 100. It will build a custom event from that. And if I want to mark this custom event as a conversion, I can mark this custom event as a conversion, and it will be start recording as a conversion inside the conversion tabs. All right. If you don't want to mark anything as a conversion, you can just uncheck it. Purchase is by default a conversion event. You cannot uncheck the purchase event. By modifying event, you can modify an existing event that you have. So they are tracking an add to cart event and they are mapping it to something else. This format was used in Universal Analytics. So what they are doing is that they are tracking the old add to cart and mapping it to the new add to cart event, but they did not update the parameters. Therefore, when we imported the add to cart event inside the custom reports, we were not able to see any add to cart data, but we are still seeing add to cart event firing. So the event is firing, but it is not enhanced e-commerce event. In order to make sure that an event is an enhanced e-commerce event, you just need to make sure that when the event fires, you are sending an items object, and items is just a list of which has object of the item parameters. I think we saw an example of the list of items here. So you just need to make sure that whenever an e-commerce event file, you are sending this item array back to GA4 using Google Tag Manager or whatever thing you are using. So if you have this item array, then it will count it as an enhanced e-commerce event. If it is not there, then it will not count that as an enhanced e-commerce event. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far? This was the GA4 overview. Anything that you think we have missed, we can go over. I think we still have 15 more minutes. We can look at Google Tag Manager if we want. Unless anyone have any question using the built-in reports or the custom reports or any kind of things that they might have issues with. We don't have a custom channel grouping option yet. We only have the default channel grouping, and yeah, hopefully the other one should come soon. If you are not able to find that insight section, you can click on here and it will show you all the insight that it might have for your store. So for e-commerce one, these, and for traffic analysis, these. If anyone have any question, they can type it. Else we have like 10 more minutes. We can look at Google Tag Manager and just see how GA4 works with GTM. Okay, instead of looking at one of the test demo account, we can pull up one production account, which we can have a look, because the production one will already have some tags configured and we don't have to go over all the tags one by one. So when you are updating your Universal Analytics to GA4, make sure that you don't remove your Universal Analytics integration. Just implement GA4 right next to the Universal Analytics one. So your Universal Analytics and your GA4, both of them are tracking the same information, and you are mostly relying on Universal Analytics for your data. Unless the GA4 is completely configured and is updated for more tracking. So in this account, in this GA4 account, we have GA4 configured for this client. And uh, let's look at the purchase event, because the transaction event is something that you want to implement on your website. If you will go to their documentation and switch down to purchase event, we have one more question, that which account would you prefer to use in Google Ads? So we have the option to import conversions from Universal Analytics to G Ads. We have option to import GA4 conversion to Google Ads, and we have a third option to use Google Ads conversion tag. I would always prefer using Google Ads conversion tag if I have the option to implement everything using Google Tag Manager. So if we have a developer on our end, or if we have someone who manages the technical side, I would ask them to configure Google Ads conversion tag through Google Tag Manager, add the purchase event, or add the checkout event, or add the view content event wherever you want. And I will not rely on GA4 or Universal Analytics. However, my first recommendation will be to use Google Ads account. Second will be to use GA4. Third will be to use Universal Analytics. I would not recommend using Universal Analytics, because Universal Analytics highly relies on cookies. And if the user has blocked cookies on their browser, then it will not track that particular session. However, Universal Analytics GA4 still tracks that session if the cookies have been blocked by the user. To overcome this issue that you are facing with the difference in revenue, I will recommend that you will ask your developer, whoever has configured your Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager on your client website or on your website, to set up a server-side container. So what server-side container does is that it does not track everything directly from the client's website. It routes the event from the web container to the server container. What I mean by that is, let's say a user goes to your website and they make a purchase on the website. So what will happen is that the Google Tag Manager will track that purchase event, and it will send it to GA4, and it will send to Universal Analytics, and it will send that event back to a Google Ads account. So we always want to make sure that we have Google Ads conversion tag that are tracking the events, not the other ones, UA or GA4. We don't want to rely on the other tags. However, they are still first party, and they will be tracking all the information correctly. However, I would still always prefer working with Google Ads tag rather than UA or GA4. You should ask your person to implement a server-side tracking for you, And what server-side tracking will does is that it will track all the users, no matter where they are coming from, or if they have iOS 14 updates, if they had ad blockers, or if they had any kind of client-side restrictions. The server-side tracking system will always track that user. For example, for this particular client, when a Google Tag Manager container fires on the website, it does not send a request back to Google Tag Manager. If I will show you the network tab for all the requests that have been made from this one. All right. So you see, when their Google Tag Manager container loads, it loads from a subdomain, matrix.jobreadyprogrammer.com. It does not load from Google Tag Manager.com. So what it does is that it bypasses all the ad blockers, all the restrictions that the client might have, and it collects all the events from this server container. So none of the event actually fires on the website. If you will see these three tags, these are being configured for the teachable platform. These are not the client's tag. All the client events that are firing here inside their Google Tag Manager or for their GA4, they are sending requests to a custom subdomain. They are not sending data back to GA4. So these custom requests, they go to the server container here, and from this server container, they are sending requests back to GA4. So this makes sure that all the data gets captured, no matter what those restrictions are there from the user. You will also see that the first request that is being triggered, it's by double click, stats.d.double click. This one is Google Signals request, and we have enabled this client to track remarketing data and use these audiences for Google Ads. So therefore, this is the request that fires when a Google Signals has been configured. But your problem for having different revenue, it is something else. You have to connect back with your developer who has implemented your Google Analytics 4 and Google Ads tag, and you need to tell them to check why there is a discrepancy between them. It is not an attribution issue. If the number of transactions are different, that means there is some error when the session is being recorded. It can either be when the user is going from your Google Ads account to the website, there is maybe a redirect, or you have not configured cross-domain tracking properly for GA4. What you can do is that you can go to your GA4 account, go to admin, and just check if the cross-domain tracking is working properly or not. The first thing you should do is check the number of transactions in your Universal Analytics and GA4. Let's say you have 100 transactions in Universal Analytics, and then you have 100 transactions in GA4. That means both of them are tracking transactions correctly. Then the second thing you need to check is what is the source and medium of transactions in Universal Analytics, and what is the source and medium transaction in GA4. You can do that from the Explore tab. You can go to Explore, build a similar e-commerce report there, and then check what is the source and medium of all the reference. I think we had a similar report built in right here. So you can check for if you have a lot more transactions, then check for one particular day for 24 hours and then see if there is a different or not. So instead of having campaign here, just import transaction ID. So now you know that this transaction ID came from direct and this came from direct, and you can check for all the ones that you have that you are tracking in GA4. Just make a comparison between your Universal Analytics and GA4. And if you see that your GA4 is attributing more traffics to direct and none, that means somewhere in the session, it is being not properly configured. Or if you see a referral domain here, that is your own domain, maybe your subdomain or a third-party affiliate domain that you don't want it to be here, just go to admin, go to your data streams, and make sure that your cross-domain tracking is configured properly. Because in Universal Analytics, the cross-domain tracking was configured through Google Tag Manager. Inside each tag, we had an option for cross-domain tracking for Universal Analytics. Where is the So when you configure Universal Analytics tag, you had the option to configure cross-domain tracking right here under more tagging option. You just need to make sure that the allow linker is true. And then you have added all the domains for cross-domain tracking. This is the first thing. And to implement the similar thing in GA4, just go to more tagging options and define your domains. So if you have any internal domains that is re-referring itself back, just add all of them here and exclude them from the unwanted referrals. This should remove anything which is bypassing your attribution issue. So for example, if the user is coming from Google Ads, but due to that reference, it is being marked as a referral traffic, you should exclude that from here, and it should fix any attribution that you might have. If the issue still exists, make sure that you do one proper session to see if the G-Click ID is being transferred from your landing pages to your checkout pages. Exclude all the all the payment servers that you might have, PayPal, Stripe, all exclude all of them. And if you will click on any of the link on your website, let's say you go to test any other page which is not on your domains, make sure that it has the linker when it goes to the next page. I think for Google and for Universal Analytics, it was _GA, and in for GA4 it is GL or something like that. I think it's aesthetic GL, or I'm not exactly sure, but just make sure that if you have multiple domains, your cross-domain tracking is working fine and your session is not breaking when the user goes from one step to another step. All right, do we have any other questions? For your question, prefer using Google Ads tag, then prefer using GA4 tag, and then prefer using Universal Analytics. We are almost at the end, so I don't think we will go over. We will not go over Google Tag Manager. We have a few more minutes. If anyone want to ask any more questions, they can ask. Yeah, sure. If anyone thinks that they might need any more details after the meeting, they can email me. If they have any particular question, you can find email at the end of the slides. I usually reply every email after 24 hours. Else we can schedule one more meeting next week or after that if we find a need for that. So yeah, it was great. Thank you everyone for joining the session. And if you can provide me a recording after the session, that would be helpful. So yeah.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
I can send that to you.
Thank you. That would be awesome.
Thank you, Hassan. That was very useful.
Yeah, sure. I hope so.
Yeah, I think if no one else has any questions, then we can sign off.